So a lot of interesting developments. Minnesota with the police referendum saying, you know what, we don't want to defund the police. We want more police.
We want more police, as we've heard from people in those areas where the homicide rate has been skyrocketing in Minneapolis and in the environs around Minneapolis. So that is an interesting outcome there. And as we continue to watch these New Jersey race and Virginia race. And as you say, there was going to be a female mayor, the first female mayor of Boston either way, two women running against each other, but Michelle Wu is the winner in Boston. So
let's talk more about some of the key races, Virginia, New Jersey, this election night. Joining us, political consultant Kevin Walling and Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com, host of the Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio. You know, Guy, I was on your show earlier today, and there was a lot of indications that Youngkin was going to do well. The motivation, the momentum was there. We haven't called this race, but boy, it sure looks like he's going to pull this off. Your thoughts on this day and what it means?
Well, it's a three-point race with 96% of the vote counted in Virginia. So I feel like we haven't called it yet, but the math and the path for Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, is basically more or less non-existent at this point. And talking to a lot of Youngkin folks, top-level people on his campaign in recent days, they said that their numbers were pretty consistently for the last few weeks at +3. And look where we are right now. +3. I went to that Loudoun County rally last night, the final rally of the campaign for Glenn Youngkin. I was struck by a few things: his discipline, his messaging, the way that he appealed to different swaths of voters in a way that I thought was really, really savvy. And I noticed driving in, there was a huge line of cars to get in, probably between 1,500 and 2,000 people there. And there were pickup trucks with Trump stickers, and there were Volvos with middle school honor roll stickers. And it struck me, if that is a coalition that Republicans can replicate, not just in Virginia, which was Biden +10, but in other states that are even more closely divided, in 2020, for example, that is a potent combination. And looking for candidates who can do that, I think, is job number one moving forward for the Republican Party. And I would encourage a lot of purple state Republicans to study Glenn Youngkin, his rhetoric, his messaging, his restraint, his discipline, study all of it, because what he's done in Virginia is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch. Kevin, I want to bring you in here. That coalition that seems to have formed in Virginia between suburban moms and school issue oriented parents and blue collar Southwestern Virginians. What do you make of it?
Yeah, Martha, it's a great question. You know, I think in every election, it's either a base election or a persuasion election. And this was certainly a persuasion election. And Glenn Youngkin ran a really strong campaign, speaking as a Democrat. And I think one of the key stories coming out of this evening will be the notion of Biden-Youngkin voters, folks that delivered, the majority of congressional districts in Virginia to the Democrats in 2018, repudiated Donald Trump in 2020 in most of those suburb counties, as you've talked about throughout the night with Bill on the wall, and now have flipped back to Glenn Youngkin. You know, Glenn, interestingly enough, spent $7 million, for example, on a positive persuasion in support of his campaign before Terry McAuliffe spent $1. So on ads. And, you know, to Shannon's point with exit polling, you know, Glenn had really strong favorables in a lot of that exit polling that she's been talking about with, these voters' reaction to this. And that was a really hard deficit, even though, Terry, hammered home the idea that Glenn was Trump. That wasn't necessarily the case in a lot of the mindsets of these voters as we're seeing this play out in the Commonwealth.
And Guy, it was white women in Virginia. That was the biggest turn. Biden won 50-49 over Donald Trump in 2020. In this race, white women, 57-43, Youngkin over McAuliffe.
Yeah, and if you look at the exit polls, and they'll still get finalized here in the next couple days, but this whole effort by Terry McAuliffe to paint Glenn Youngkin as Donald Trump was just a failure. I mean, you look at the favorability numbers, Glenn Youngkin significantly higher by double digits than President Trump in the state of Virginia, with Terry McAuliffe really sucking wind sort of down in Trump territory, at least in the favorable. So look, this is how a Republican can flip what has turned into a blue state in the last decade in particular, red. And as I mentioned before, I think that there's a lot of lessons to learn there. It's also looking like likely, I should say, because we haven't called it yet, a clean sweep of the statewide races in Virginia. Republicans have not won a single statewide race in the Old Dominion, in the Commonwealth, in 12 years. It looks very likely that that has changed 3 times over in one fell swoop tonight, with a real chance of flipping the lower house, the House of Delegates, in the state legislature as well. I mean, it is quite an extraordinary evening in Virginia.
Yeah, and Winsome Sears, the first black woman elected
That's right.
lieutenant governor, I mean, is significant as well. Doesn't get a lot of mention.
Yeah, no, and she's a very interesting player in this race. She was born in Jamaica, raised in the Bronx. She's a U.S. Marine. Winsome Sears is a very interesting up-and-comer political person to watch, and you know, if this goes the way it looks like it's going to go, she could be the first woman and black woman lieutenant governor, in Virginia. But Kevin, I want to ask you a question about President Biden, because I think he may have landed now from his trip and his return from Scotland. Before he took off, he said, look, whatever happens in Virginia is not really a reflection on me or my agenda. But when he lands, at the very least, he's going to be told that these are 2 races that are much tighter than anyone anticipated. Do you think he takes something away from that? Does he look at that and say, maybe I've allowed, the progressive wing of my party to pull me to a place where the American people just aren't?
Yeah, it's a good point, Martha. I think there are some takeaways. I'm hopeful that this will be a wake-up call to Democrats who are in universal control of the federal government to actually do something and pass the bipartisan infrastructure package, pass the Budget Reconciliation Act that will do so much for the American people, because that's what they were elected overwhelmingly to do last November. And they've got to start delivering for the American people beyond the great things that came of the American Rescue Package. So that's the takeaway, I think, to Democrats on the federal level, is that we not only have to do something, but we also have to campaign on it. The fact that we're not talking about the fact that, we cut childhood poverty in half in the last 9 months since this administration has taken over is a big deal, and we're just not getting that message out. So hopefully this is a wake-up call in advance of the midterms. We've got a year before that to not only deliver for the American people, but also to campaign and get that message out. I think that's the key takeaway for the administration and for Democrats writ large.
And finally, Guy, with the Atlanta Braves winning the World Series 7-0, that means that Republicans in Georgia also have something to celebrate tonight with the the fact that Major League Baseball took the All-Star game out of Atlanta, and now they are the world champions.
Yeah, enjoy that, Mr. Commissioner, and welcome home, Mr. President. What a night.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Amen.
All right. We have a lot to process tonight. We're going to get analysis from all kinds of folks. We've got the Virginia call. We've got the New Jersey call that is tightening even still. Stand by.
We'll be right back.